Welcome, everybody. We're really glad that you are participating in the second module in our Transitioning Through Change series. This is Gretchen Hogg with Jerry Eddington. Hi, Jerry.
Hello, everyone.
And we are the co-creators of Lighten Up and Thrive, Joyful Living for Mind, Body, and Soul. And again, this is the second module in this series. And today's module is called From the Inside Out, Effective Ways to Manage Stress. Today, we're going to cover several key points about stress management that you can implement right away. And today's module is broken down into 6 sections. The first part is what can you gain from stress management. We're going to talk about not only what you can gain from learning some stress management, but also help you identify what currently is causing stress in your life. And we'll also help you identify and record your expectations for this class on an activity sheet. The activity sheets that you have will help you identify, be able to record, be able to see how you can transition through this entire process. We're going to particularly be talking about acute and chronic stressors today. So in the second part is we're going to help you identify how you respond to stress. You'll experience a guided visualization designed to induce stress so that you can benchmark your stress responses. And then we'll guide you through a technique to de-stress that you can use anytime and anywhere. In the third part, we're going to help you explore the 2 types of stress, and then we'll help you identify some examples so that you can see if they pertain to your life. And in the fourth part, we're going to identify what are some of the stress management techniques. And in addition to learning about these 2 types of stress, you're going to learn how to use different stress management techniques for the acute and the chronic approaches to dealing with stress. And then in the 5th part, how will you manage your stress? In this section, we'd like you to choose and select a single technique from each category on the activity sheets. And again, we'll guide you through this process, but this is going to help you identify the pros and the cons of each technique. And then in the last part, what are the implications of managing or not managing stress? So this will help close out our exploration of stress management, and we'll look at some of the ramifications of unmanaged stress and also the benefits of properly managing your stress responses. So the first activity is all about expectations. We all know that we're feeling stressed, and this is a daily occurrence for most of us now. But we also want to help you identify what triggers your stress response. It's usually triggered by external circumstances that threaten either your physical, your emotional, or your psychological safety. And the bottom line is that we all experience it, and some more than others. So we would like you to take out your activity sheet number 1. And in this activity sheet, this is going to help you set your focus for this module. You have lots of worthwhile reasons for wanting to explore this stress management module. So let's begin by just taking a quick look at how you might respond to a fairly common stressful situation. As you look at that activity sheet 1, this is all about the expectations. So for the first one, we want you to answer the question, what is a current source of stress in your life? And you can pause the recording at any time to take as much time as you need to answer that question. But also the second thing is, what do you think really drew you to this teleseminar? And again, take your time and pause the recording and answer and take as long as you So now we're going to actually take you through a stress experience. And the stress that we experience can be magnified or minimized by how we react to it. So we're going to be visualizing a stressful situation, a traffic jam, something that we can all relate to. And then we're going to use your experience of the situation to explore some stress management techniques. Now, here's the thing. If you were recently involved in a traffic accident, you may not want to fully engage in this visualization in case that might trigger you a little bit too much. But you know yourself the best, so do what's right for you. So I'd like you to take out activity sheet number 2, and I want you just to notice before we start the visualization, I want you to just look at these 3 pages, and you're going to notice that there are boxes labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I'm going to describe a situation and do a visualization with you, and you are just going to be answering those questions in each box as we guide you through that. And at key stopping points, we're going to ask you to just notice what you're thinking and then some of your physical responses to the scenario. And then you're simply going to write down what these responses are in the various boxes. So let's begin. Picture yourself being stuck in an unexpected traffic jam. You're surrounded by cars. No one is moving. You see a traffic signal ahead with a red light. The light changes to green, and you feel hope that the cars ahead of you will begin to move. No one seems to be moving, though. Come on, move, you might yell out to yourself with frustration. After 1 minute, the light changes to yellow and then to red. But not a single car moves. I want you to notice what you're thinking and then also how your body is responding when you just go through that physical and mental reactions to thinking about that stressful response. And then you're going to write down a few notes this in section 1 of your stress response sheet. So pause your recording, and then I want you to answer. When not a single car has moved, notice what you were thinking and notice how your body is responding. And pause your recording for a moment. Now let's go back to our scenario, the traffic jam. So you are sitting in a traffic jam and you're running late for a job interview. You look at the clock and are reminded that you need to be at an interview in 15 minutes. You're beginning to worry about being late. What comes to your mind? How would you describe your body's responses as you're adding in another layer of stress in this scenario? Pause your recording as you answer the questions in your second box there. You're beginning to worry about being late. What thoughts come to your mind, and how would you describe your body's responses? Pause the recording and take a moment to answer that. Now, we're going to ramp this up even more. Continue with your visualization in this scenario and really visualize it and see it, feel it, and hear it. Really be willing to engage fully in this process. So here you go. Now, in the scenario, the light turns green again. You feel hopeful that the traffic will surge forward, but no one moves again. After a minute, the light cycles to yellow and then to red, and again, you didn't move an inch. How much of a spike did your mental stress just make? Can you give it a percentage? Did it go up 10%, 15%, 50%? How much of a spike did your physical stress response just make? And we'd like you to give that a percentage too. So take your time, pause the recording, and write your responses in the box numbered number 3. All right, returning back to your scenario, and we're going to ramp this up even higher. We really want you to tune into what are your classic responses. So it's a hot summer day. Your windows are rolled up and your air conditioner is blasting as it tries to keep you cool. The driver of the car next to you suddenly turns up the volume of his stereo full blast, and all you can hear is the annoying thump, thump, boom, boom of his subwoofers as a pounding sensation resonates and vibrates your car with every single beat from his speakers. And on top of everything else, you hate this kind of music. You can feel your anger surge as this other driver imposes his music on you. So, in box number 4, I want you to write down a single word for your mental response. Remember, you can feel your anger surging as this other driver is just imposing this music that you hate on top of you. So write down a single word for your mental responses, and then write down a single word for your physical response. Pause your recording as you answer those questions. All right, let's ramp up this scenario even more. Now, the light finally turns green, and you're once again hopeful that the traffic will begin to move. You can't see very far ahead, but you notice the car in front of you moves forward slightly, and then suddenly, that guy with that thumping stereo lurches forward and tries to squeeze right in front of you into that very small space that was just created. Well, not only does this feel disrespectful to you, you honk your horn at this guy, and of course, he responds with an obscene gesture and continues to crowd into that small space. Okay, well now this time, in this box number 5, I want you to see if you can assign a shape or a color to your mental response. Remember, this guy responds with an obscene gesture and continues to crowd into that small space. So give this mental response a shape or a color, and then see if you can do the same thing. Give a shape or color to your physical response. For example, do you see red? Do you see black? And then tune into your physical responses. See where that physical response is showing up in your body. Is it in your throat? Is it in your heart center? Do you feel your heart pounding? Is it in your stomach where you feel like your stomach is going into knots? So just tune into that for a moment and then pause the recording and record your answers. Now, let's ramp this up even more. Now your attention is drawn to your dashboard where a bright yellow light suddenly appears. Oh my goodness, it's your check engine light. You just had your car serviced last month, so there's no reason why that light should be coming on right now. You can feel the tension grow as you begin to wonder if your car will stall on you and if you will ever get to this interview. So to reduce the strain on your car, you turn your air conditioner off and you open up your windows, and then you can even hear your neighbor's thumping stereo, the guy that flipped you off, and his music is even louder now. And you can feel your heart pounding and your pulse speeding up You notice your mouth is dry, your forehead is sweaty, and your head is starting to hurt. You feel trapped in a situation that's inescapable. And undoubtedly, you're definitely going to be late for your job interview. Oh, my goodness. Okay, we're going to end this visualization here, and we're going to talk about some of the stress responses. So for a moment, I want you to look at that box number 6, and we're going to go into, in a moment, helping you to identify about how you can help yourself relax. Here's the thing. We want to talk about our breath for a moment. We carry with us at all times one of the most powerful stress management techniques that exists. It's our breathing, our breath. We all know how to breathe, but most of us, we breathe too shallowly to get the stress-reducing benefits of breath. When it comes to managing stress, a shallow breath doesn't do enough. Here's the thing that we like to remind people, and Jerry and I have talked about this a lot. Breath is always with us, and if you think about it, it's the first thing you do when you come into life, and it's the last thing you do when you transition out. So that means that breath is pretty important, right? So to breathe deeply, you need to allow your abdomen, your lower belly to expand. So let's try it for a moment, and Jerry and I are going to do this with you. And as you take in a nice deep breath, we want you to notice the effect that it has on your mind and your body. And that's when you're going to go into that box number 6 to record your responses. So it's helpful just to exhale all of your breath out for a moment. So take in a nice deep breath and exhale. And now take a slow, deep breath inward, allowing your lower belly to expand as though your breath reaches all the way down to the bottom of your belly. It's like you're inflating a balloon. So take in that nice deep breath, expand your lower belly, and then we want you to hold it for just a few seconds. Just hold it, and then release the breath and allow your abdomen just to return to its normal position. And now once again, we're going to guide you to take in another nice deep breath. And here's the thing, when you're pausing and holding your breath in between the in-breath and the out-breath, we want you just to scan your body and notice where you're holding on to any tension, because when you're pausing and creating that tension, you more easily can identify where do you typically hold tension in your body. So again, take in another nice deep breath, breathing all the way down into your lower belly and allow it to expand. Take in a nice deep breath now. And then pause, hold your breath for just a count of 2 or 4, whatever that is for you. Hold your breath, tune into that tension in your body, and then exhale. Blow it out all the way. That's right, beautiful. And now, on your activity sheet, we want you to write a picture, draw a picture, or a word, or a phrase that describes how your mind is responding. For example, is it like a pressure cooker letting off steam? Or did you feel like a feather falling gently downward? You're also going to do the same thing for your body. What were your physical responses? So take a moment now, pause the recording, and answer those questions in box number 6 on your activity sheet. Now, let's look at 3 questions that arises from this visualization and the breathing technique that you just experienced. First of all, we'd like you to reflect on the types of thoughts that you had in the situation situation as it became more and more stressful. It's difficult for most people to think about strategies to calm themselves down, and instead, it's more common for people to allow negative thoughts to take over. Additionally, we tend to express these negative thoughts inappropriately by complaining, by venting, by yelling, by worrying, or feeling intense anger or frustration. And while these are, they're all normal emotions, and I don't know if there's any other emotions that you want to identify for yourself, but we all have these type of emotions, and we call them triggered responses. So we'd like to ask yourselves right now, what physical sensations did you also notice as those situations were ramped up and became more and more stressful? Physical sensations that typically accompany stress include faster and or harder heartbeats, tightness in muscles, breathlessness, shallow breathing, indigestion, nausea, stomach ache, tiredness, skin rashes even, clenched jaws, headaches, loss of appetite, increased food cravings, sweaty palms and sweaty armpits, butterflies in your stomach, trembling. All things are what can be affected by a typical stress response. And then the third thing, we'd like you just to think about and reflect about the breathing exercise that you just did and how did that affect you. So I want you to tune into that. What did you notice? I know Jerry and I oftentimes work when we're with people as we're coaching them about coming up with colors and sensations and giving it a shape. And you can release and let go of those, sending them up into the clouds and or releasing in a balloon and watching them disappear up in the horizon. All of those are really great techniques. And breath, again, is something that's always with you. And breathing is a proven method for calming down your body's reactions to stressful situations. And by calming your physical reactions, you can pay more attention to your thoughts then, because the reality is that your breath mirrors your mind, and your mind mirrors your breath. This gives us an opportunity to turn away from the negative thoughts and to move towards thoughts about how to manage a situation. And the other thing that's really important to know about this also is that your breathing, when you engage in that deep abdominal breathing, it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that relaxation phase of your nervous system, and it also affects and stops the stress circuit. So this is an important thing. It's a really simple thing, and if you just engage with your breathing really quickly, you can interface and stop that stress circuit within just a few minutes. So now there's the next transition that we want to go into is that you've just experienced vicariously through that visualization how you respond to an example being in a traffic jam and experience the effects of using your breathing as a stress management technique. Now, we're going to answer this question. What other kinds of stress are there? And let's dig a little deeper into this subject. So that traffic jam represents one of two types of stress experience. And while a traffic jam is a stressful experience, you probably recovered pretty quickly once you get out of that traffic jam in your mind's eye, right? Just like a movie scenario. So we'd like to just look at that situation and imagine if that becomes long-lasting or a chronic situation. So the two general types of stress that people experience are acute stress and chronic stress. So first, acute stress can be defined as a sudden, momentary, occasional, or brief stressors. The acute stress can be rapid and it can be brief. That's the thing just to understand about acute stress. You typically experience a sharp spike in your body's reactions, but the experience of it doesn't stay with you for long, or the stressor itself goes away quickly. A traffic jam is an example of an acute stressor. But the second type of stress, chronic stress, is the kind of stress that you might not notice until you hit a physical, emotional, or a psychological tipping point, or in other words, a threshold that has built up over time. For example, a stressful job or a work environment or a long-term illness are oftentimes associated with chronic stress. So again, chronic stress is slow and constant and common in our Western society. And it's that type of thing that puts the nervous system on a constant alert, as if danger were ever present. Acute stress is experienced again in response to an immediate perceived threat, either physically, emotionally, or psychologically. And the threat can be real or imagined. It's the perception of threat that triggers the response. And along with that, the autonomic nervous system increases your stress chemicals like cortisol and adrenaline and other hormones that affect your heart rate and your blood pressure. And blood is shunted away from your larger muscles. You notice a lot of different physical responses. In chronic stress, again, it's a state of ongoing physiological arousal. And this occurs when the body experiences so many stressors that the autonomic nervous system, it rarely has a chance to activate that relaxation response. Now, our modern lifestyle, our high-pressure job, loneliness, and busy traffic, all of those can be a constant state of perceived threat. But it puts your body in a perpetual fight or flight and eventually wears down the body, causing illnesses, whether physically or emotionally. And guess what? It's estimated that 90% of doctors' visits are stress-related. We're going to go over more examples of acute stress in a moment, but I wanted to also just let you know that there are other types of stress. If you've ever heard of eustress and new stress and distress, eustress is actually defined as good stress, healthful, stimulating, motivating, exciting. It energizes you and it makes you feel alive, interested, and engaged in life. It fuels success and achievement. Now, we're not going to go into these three other different types of stressors, but just wanted to give you a heads up on that there are some other types of stress that we can identify. And then new stress is Neustress, and this is exactly the beginning root of the word, neutral stress, when the arousal is neither harmful nor helpful. And then we have distress, too much, too little, that is actually harmful to the body and also to the mind. So let's go back to acute stress for a moment. Examples of acute stress might be a car accident. And yes, if a car accident is something that contributes to a lot of physical reactions that you're having to deal with, or even some post-trauma from the accident, that certainly tips right over into a chronic situation. Being late for an appointment, being yelled at. Jerry, what other things can you think of for acute stressors?
Well, we already talked about being stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
Having someone surprise you.
Mm-hmm.
Going on a roller coaster. Being given a difficult short-term task. For a lot of people, public speaking.
Oh, absolutely.
And performing. And another big one, your wedding day.
Yeah, and that, even though that can be an acute stressor, that can tip over into that those other definitions of eustress, which is all, and it's something that's really exciting. So I think that's an interesting category that a lot of people don't talk about. Some other things that might be acute stressors is, getting up your nerve to go ask your boss for a raise. I don't know if you've ever had to do that before, but I know I have. And that can be something that's really stressful too.
Absolutely.
Something like, just having too much going on at one time where you feel like you're just getting overwhelmed, even though they might be exciting things going on in our lives. Those can also be acute stressors. And also, who doesn't know this one, fighting with family members.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So those are all examples of acute stressors. And now also, let's talk about some chronic situations. And we're going to ask you to identify some of those in a moment, but let's just review some of these. So some chronic stressors could be, again, constant fighting in a relationship or a marriage, health problems.
I would say another big one is financial problems, having debt, negative cash flow.
Absolutely.
Physical limitations, not being able to do some of the things that you've been able to do before. Societal issues such as living in a dangerous neighborhood can be very stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Work-related difficulties. You either can't find a job, you have difficulty getting along with your boss, supervisor, or difficult coworkers. And starting a new business.
Absolutely. So a big one that a lot of people experience nowadays, too, is taking care of parents.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really big one. And so take a moment just to review and come up with some of your own examples. And you can pause the recording at this point and come up with some of your things that are maybe currently in your life and or reflect possibly in the past 6 months and or the past year and see what might be some of the type of stressors that you've been experiencing in your life. Here's the thing now. Regardless of whether it's acute stress or chronic stress, neither one of those is particularly healthy for your mind or for you physically, but chronic stress certainly has a much greater toll on your physical body and also the mental and emotional aspects of yourself. But here's the thing. There are ways to mitigate or to avoid or diminish the effects of acute stress and chronic stress. Just like you experienced with the breathing exercise after that traffic jam visualization, let's look at some other approaches to managing stress. Let's take out your activity labeled number 4A, and you can take some notes on this one, approaches to managing stress. I'd like you just to think about some examples that might be you taking a proactive approach. And a proactive approach, the definition for that really is that it's a preemptive attempt to avoid or minimize the potential for stress. The proactive approaches involve modifying your behavior or your mindset before the stressful situation has occurred. And with the proactive approach, you make a habit out of preparing yourself to handle a stressful situation that life sends your way. This is huge. And so you might want to write down that definition in that proactive square on that upper left corner on that activity worksheet 4A. Again, the definition is that it's a preemptive attempt to minimize the potential for stress, and it involves modifying behavior or your mindset before the stressful situation occurs. There are both healthy and unhealthy ways to respond proactively. So below that, you'll see 2 columns, the healthy and the unhealthy ways to respond. One example of a healthy proactive approach is to make a daily habit of, say, doing yoga or exercise or walking. And, Jerry, I know you like to do water aerobics.
Water aerobics is awesome. And I try to do that at least 3 times a week, and sometimes on my own even more.
Yeah. So whatever that is for you that you can think of, that would be something that would be a healthy, proactive, in other words, something that's a preemptive, something that you do before, just as a routine, so your body can learn how to handle stress when it comes your way a lot more easily. This overall reduces your experience of stress and also your response to stress. So let's look at that unhealthy column right there. An unhealthy proactive approach might be something like using alcohol or drugs, illicit drugs. And or I know some people speed in cars or take out unhealthy ways of driving in a car. Maybe they like to take long trips to help themselves unwind and be speeding as they're doing so, which certainly isn't the healthiest type of activity either. Those are some things that we want you to write down, and then certainly come up with some of your own responses. Just pause the recording for a moment. Now, the other approach to managing stress would be the reactive phase, and you'll see that in your upper right. Stress is defined as something that's an in-the-moment response to a stressful situation. Reactive approaches are something that involves changing your behavior or your mindset after the initial stress has occurred. You take action in a reaction to experiencing stress. Let's say that one more time. You take action in reaction to experiencing stress. So again, it's in the moment. Your response is in the moment to a stressful situation, and you change the behavior or your mindset after that initial stressor. So let's look at the 2 columns below that. When you respond in a healthy reactive way, you can minimize the effect of stress. For example, if you're stuck in a traffic jam, you know that breathing, like we just went over, breathing deeply can help you calm your nerves. And it's something that, again, will stop that stress circuit responses.
One of the things I like to do is I like to use my essential oils to put some on my pulse points so I can breathe the essential oil energy in, and that helps calm me down too.
Oh, absolutely. Jerry and I both love using essential oils to help not only the physiological response too, but they also can work on the mental, emotional, and the spiritual layers. They're very, very powerful and something that we use a lot when we're coaching clients. That's a really powerful way to do that, and I'd like you to think of some responses that you can put down in this column as well. Just stop the recording along the way whenever you want to take a moment to put these responses into, take some notes for yourself. In the unhealthy reactive way, in that column, you want to look at the way you might respond in an unhealthy reactive way, and you may feel as though you might minimize that stress response, but you may be causing other problems. A perfect example that we see a lot of ramping up with is people maybe stopping at a bar for a couple of drinks after sitting through a traffic jam or after work when you've had a really stressful day. And you may think that it's calming your nerves, but if you drink too much, it is something that certainly could be dangerous if you got behind the wheel of your car again, or it can lead to a habituated pattern of drinking alcohol as a way of handling the stress response. And that certainly can tend to be a very unhealthy reactive response that leads to other problems, not only in the short term, but certainly in the long term as well. Look at those healthy and unhealthy reactive responses. Pause your recording. List some of those responses right there. And now, we'd like you to pull out your activity sheet labeled number 4, types and techniques. And again, you'll see types of stress, acute and chronic, and you'll also see reactive and proactive. In this workshop, as you're looking at those quadrants, think back to that traffic jam visualization, because it's a perfect example to really look at acute stress. And I'd like you to brainstorm some of the ways that you identified for yourself in ways that you could handle that situation more proactively. What could you have done prior to being caught in that traffic jam to either avoid the traffic jam altogether or to minimize that stress of that experience of being in the traffic jam? So take a moment, pause the recording, and you come up with some of your own ideas. What could you have done? And then we'll go over some other possibilities. Here are some of the things that you could maybe have considered. Could you have started out earlier or leaving yourself some additional time, or maybe you could have had an alternate route that was identified for yourself, or you could have planned or prepared in advance with a backup plan, or you could have done things to visualize and keep yourself relaxed along the way. You could have possibly listened to a traffic report, or what other ways could you think of?
Well, if you're stuck in traffic too, you can also maybe take the time to listen to one of your favorite audiobooks or some calming music.
Mm-hmm.
And another really good thing, especially if you're on a way to an appointment for an interview or something like that, make sure you have the number available that you can give somebody a call and let them know, hey, I'm running late, I'm in this traffic jam.
Yeah.
So they can, know what's going on.
Perfect, absolutely. And so, again, come up with your own and see how creative you can be, so you can start really tuning into some of your own strategies that you really already do know, but we're just helping you to remind yourself of these. So right below that, in that acute column, on the bottom is a reactive instead of proactive, or reactive if you're caught in that phase. So let's brainstorm ways for how you can handle a situation reactively. So in addition to breathing deeply, ask yourself, what could you have done during your experience of the traffic jam that could have minimized the stress of that? Take a moment to pause and then come back and we'll go over some of our suggestions. Now, some of the suggestions that we've come up with are EFT, doing tapping, if any of you know the emotional freedom techniques. Essential oils, again, would be perfect in this situation. If you found yourself deep breathing in with the essential oils, one of the easiest things also to do is to send light and love, as Jerry and I say, to that person that, really got you all fired up and triggers your stress response. Because really what it does is affecting you more than anything.
Absolutely.
So that's a really powerful thing for you to do. And one of the other things is, whenever you can, think of humor to incorporate in this situation. Something that we like to do is to remind people, like after you've caught yourself in that type of a situation, think about how you could explain it to somebody else after this situation, and think about it and infuse as much humor as you can in that situation. That allows you to start mitigating that stress response for yourself too. Even give yourself a shoulder massage or...
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And just really shifting your thoughts to more peaceful thoughts and practicing a relaxation technique. Or if you have, like in your audio files, like an ocean, just literally taking yourself out of the space for a little while and just kind of visualizing being at the beach. Okay, I'm just getting there and just enjoying that space for a moment.
Now, once you've identified that, let's look at the bottom right column for chronic stress and ways that you could have some reactive techniques for dealing with reactive and proactive ways for dealing with chronic stress. So let's look at that upper quadrant actually first on the proactive chronic phase. I'd like you to pick a situation that involves chronic stress, and you're going to refer to that activity sheet number 3, and I'd like you to just use something that maybe you've identified identified as a chronic stressor. Maybe you gave yourself some examples, whether it was maybe constant fighting or health problems or financial problems, whatever that is. I'd like you to pick something out of that, and I'd like you just to imagine putting yourself in an example that would have been a chronic stress situation that you identified. I'd like you to think about what would be a proactive response to dealing with something that you identified as a chronic stressor. So pause the recording for a moment and write some things in that upper right quadrant about chronic proactive ways that you could do whatever the example is that you wrote down in your activity sheet number 3. Some of the things that, we'll just use maybe financial stress, Jerry, since that seems to be something maybe pretty common for most people. Let's think of some proactive ways for dealing with this chronic stressor. It could be something like maybe establishing a budget or talking to a financial planner.
Or you can start tracking your spending habits and have a designated saving account for emergency situations, too.
Absolutely. Anything that you can think about in terms of how you could remove some of the chronic stress of financial situations. And maybe some of the other examples might be a change in a job, different situational life circumstances things, or other things maybe could be meditation or exercise, really working on anything that would incorporate some healthy lifestyle choices and nutritional eating.
And along with that, too, is making sure that you're keeping hydrated. And a reminder that if you're feeling thirsty, that you've already waited too long to hydrate, that it's very important to hydrate on a regular basis, especially in stressful situations.
Absolutely. And one of the things Jerry and I like to teach, too, is clutter clearing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really powerful one to organize your home and your workspace. The reason is that your home really, truly is a reflection of you. And you can take, just various rooms, but you want your home to be a Zen space so that if you are dealing with chronic stress, your home can become just that space where when you walk into it, it's like taking a deep breath in and of itself.
One of the things that I've been working on with clutter clearing also is my electronic clutter clearing. I'm amazed at how much I have on my computer and my iPad and my iPhone, and just, going through and seeing what I don't need any longer that's no longer serving me.
So you answer and record as much as you can think of in that upper right quadrant on the proactive responses for chronic stress. And then let's look at some of the reactive ways that you could respond for chronic stress. So take a moment, pause the recording, and you put down some things for yourself. Now, we'd like you to think about some possible answers for this reactive phase, and we'll share some of ours. Again, maybe getting a massage more routinely or giving yourself a shoulder massage, again, essential oils. Some of the things is, maybe even giving yourself permission to cry or to speak up, or, if your car, scream out and let out, in a full blast, just let out that tension. You could ask for a hug, find different ways to express anger in a healthy way.
Definitely one of the things I like to do is journal and give a chance to go back and look over some of my previous entries. I also have a variety of groups that I am connected with through Facebook, for example, and the closed groups that I'm connected with are a good place that I could just go in and say, hey, this happened to me today. Could you send me love, energy, and you will be amazed at how many people call back. I'm giving you a virtual hug. I'm there to help you and support you. And that's just such a cool way to, ask for help. Sometimes we don't ask for help, but I've found when I do, it's there.
And that's one of the ways you certainly can do that. So now we've looked at some proactive and reactive techniques for managing stress for both the acute and the chronic situation. So now it's time to bring this knowledge a little bit closer to home and see how you want to manage the stress in your life. So as you've noticed, there are a lot of different ways to handle stress, and you may begin to realize that each technique has its own pros and cons. So, for example, the pro of deep breathing is that you don't need any special equipment or special instructions other than to deep belly breathe, because you can do it anywhere, anytime. But the con might be that maybe it's just hard to remember to remind yourself about deep breathing, because your body's autonomic nervous system keeps you breathing naturally without, any thought. And maybe it is that you've also gone into some triggered responses where you develop a shallow breathing just with some stress. So I'd like you to review activity sheet 4B for a moment and select a single technique from each quadrant. I'd like you to select whatever you might have put down for the reactive or proactive for the acute quadrants, and whatever you wrote down for that reactive and proactive for those quadrants under the chronic categories. So you might also use this as an opportunity to direct your attention to any stress maybe that you're feeling that just happened with you today and implement. So think of a scenario, and this is something that take this into the worksheet. Think of some different techniques that you could use. Look at this activity sheet number 5. You see the acute proactive, acute reactive, the chronic proactive, and the chronic reactive. And then on that left column, you'll see where you just write down the techniques, and then you write down the pros, and you write down the cons for that. So for the first, on that acute proactive quadrant, pause the recording and write down some things that you can think of. For example, deep breathing as a technique. And now, for the second one, for the acute reactive quadrant, think of some techniques that you might be able to implement, and pause the recording while you write those down. And now, for the third quadrant, for that chronic proactive one, I want you to do the same thing. Just write down some techniques for chronic proactive and record them here. And then for the chronic reactive quadrant, again, identify some of the techniques that you put down before and put these in that quadrant. So now that you have some of the pros and the cons, we want you to identify a little bit more of that. Let's say for the deep breathing. In that pros, for the deep breathing, the pros would be that it's immediately calming. Some of the cons might be a fast heart rate, or that it makes it harder to take a deep breath. So under each of those categories, list some of the pros and list some of the cons for yourself as well. And take as much time as you need to do that. And you can pause the recording until you complete that. So now, on this next slide of what are the implications of not managing stress? We've explored a lot of techniques for managing stress and even the pros and the cons of some of the techniques. Now it's time to personalize the importance of stress management to your own life. So Jerry and I love this metaphor, and we're going to use this for this discussion. Imagine this. It's a stormy day, and the rain is coming down really hard. Picture yourself standing outside in the storm, holding an umbrella. Okay, it's not lightning, so just picture that one. So this umbrella is your tool for protecting yourself from the rain, from getting too wet. And even with the umbrella, you're still going to get wet if you're outside, but it still provides some degree of protection. So, of course, if you enjoy the rain and you enjoy getting wet, the umbrella might be a hindrance to you enjoying yourself. So this is like going on a roller coaster. It may be stressful for some, but it's also fun and it's also thrill-seeking. But let's say you're dressed up in a business suit or on your way to attend a really important meeting, and you probably don't want to be too wet, so you do need that umbrella. So now imagine that you have the equivalent of an umbrella that when you are in a stressful situation. So just picture that for a moment. And that is that you know that some really good techniques for proactively or reactively shielding yourself from stress. And these techniques may not eliminate stress, just as an umbrella won't completely eliminate the rain hitting you, but they do provide a level of insulation. So let's explore the ramifications of not using stress management techniques and then the benefits of using them. Pull out your activity sheet number 6, stress implications. So notice the part above the umbrella represents the ramifications of not managing stress in a healthy way. And the part under the umbrella represents the benefits of managing stress. So please pause the recording for a moment, and then we'll come back and we're going to share some of the things that we've identified for unmanaged stress and then managing your stress effectively. So pause the recording, take a moment to write some things down. So let's talk about some of those unmanaged stress effects. Certainly, a lot of the things that we see are digestive disorders, eating disorders, headaches and migraines.
Also depression, high blood pressure, heart disease, sleep disorders, chronic fatigue, skin diseases, and sometimes immune system problems.
Absolutely, and one of the first and most prominent symptoms of chronic stress is fatigue, and also sleep issues become really a huge issue for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So think about any of those matched up with some of yours, and I'm sure you've identified some other unmanaged stress effects too. A lot of people react physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, becoming more isolated and more disengaged. Some of the ways you've identified for some of the benefits for managing stress effectively would be that you feel more peaceful. You have more feelings of satisfaction, enjoying your life. You maybe experience more resilience. In fact, that is one of the key indicators for identifying people that handle stress really, really well, is that they have a high degree of this thing called resilience. They can really bounce back easily from chronic stress. So some other ones, Jerry, that you can think of might be what?
Well, for one would be better health, longer life, more money, a better work life, a better home life, and better connections with your friends.
Oh, absolutely. And another thing, too, that we had talked about earlier is that not only this thing about cultivating resiliency, but also that when you are more proactive in your acute as well as chronic stressors in your life, it does leave you with more reserves so that when you do encounter acute or chronic stressors, you're able to just deal with them more effectively all the way around. Let's wrap this all up for a moment. You've done a really good job with identifying some of the ways to deal with stress. And literally, we've entitled this From the Inside Out, Effective Ways to Manage Stress, because stress is something that not only do we experience on the outside, but we absolutely experience it from the inside as well. So let's talk about what did you learn today. And some of the key points that we wanted to identify is not only did we go over the acute and chronic stress, but we also had you identify the factors that produce stress in your life. We hopefully have helped you identify the current chronic stress and any recent acute stressors that might be playing a role in your physical, your mental, and also your emotional and spiritual well-being. We also hopefully have had you make a commitment to yourself for identifying and implementing proactive and reactive stress management techniques. And also, we'd really like you to make this commitment to consider using new techniques that you've identified from your activity sheets. We'd like you to go over these and continue to use them and continue to refine them. We think you've done a really good job. Anything else, Jerry, that you want to add on this?
Not at this moment.
Okay, so just make sure that you can go back to your activity sheet, number 1. Really keep that as a tool for yourself. Keep plugging away at this, because any type of stress management techniques that you implement, you will notice that it makes a huge difference in your life. So that's all for today. We also just want to point out that we have created an additional bonus activity for you in your handouts. So some of the questions added for you to really consider over the next couple of weeks is to continue to identify stress in your life, your relationships, your careers, and then using those class activity sheets, notice if they fall in those categories of acute or chronic and how they're impacting on you. And use these handouts to help your responses to this. And again, some of the potent questions you might ask yourself are,
what type of stress did you encounter this week? Was it acute or chronic? What was your response? What technique did you use to address the situation? What did you learn from being more aware of your stress, identifying the type of stress, and then addressing it accordingly? How will you use this learning to address future stressful circumstances?
You'll notice you've got some of the reflections on the bottom of that as well. So some of the things that make this powerful to really anchor in your learning is to name something that this program helped you to improve, and give yourself at least one detailed success story that you can remind yourself so that you know that you can see a shift.
And what are some of the positive consequences of improvement in your life? What new perspective have you been able to own as a result of this teleseminar series? What 1 or 2 things do you want to continually focus on?
Yeah, so really reflect on those. And we hope that you utilize all of these techniques. The more you use them, the more potent that they will become. We really hope that you have enjoyed the second module in this series. We do look forward to hearing about your success. And certainly, if you have any questions as you continue through these modules, we'd really like you to call us, or you can access on our website, which is www.lightenupandthrive.com, and you can contact us, email us. Our emails are Jerry, Jerri, @lightenupandthrive.com, and Gretchen @lightenupandthrive.com. We look forward for you tuning into and enjoying the next module out of this series, and the next module is called The Fertile Mind. Change your thoughts to reap a better life. Thank you for being with us today, and we look forward to you being with us for the next module. Take care.
Goodbye.